welcome to our GDTA Spotlight session here together with Mugendi. I'd like to welcome all of you here to our special session from Africa. I think I see a lot of familiar faces. There are not too many new ones here, and I think there will others be joining. At least we had a lot of people registered. And as you know, we have this kind of 1 hour session, which we are going to record. Actually, Steffi Schwertweger, who organized everything here, she already started the recording. We'll on purpose have a Zoom call, not a webinar situation, so that we can chat with each other after the input from our special speaker today. Please already, if you have questions, ideas, you are welcome to use the chat. And then also later in the last half hour of this 60 minutes here, we can switch on our videos. You can switch on the video right now, but as soon as Mugendi will start, please, I'd like to ask you to switch the video off. And it also might help you if you hide the non-video participants. There's a feature in your video settings where you can do that, and then you have the full better view of the speaker and the presentation. And please also switch off your microphones during the presentation. And I guess that Mugendi has some minutes later after the full hour for our kind of fireside chat. But first, let's introduce Mugendi. And I'm really happy that you are joining here. We met several times, but only virtual, only in the virtual space. And I hope we have a chance, I'm pretty sure we have a chance to meet towards the end of the year in South Africa at the Decon Festival in Cape Town. But right now, I'm really happy that we have a special guest, and you are, I think your name, when I came first time to South Africa and we were talking about design thinking with Richard Paris and the representatives from Cape Town D-School, your name was popping up very, very early. So you are in Africa, you are a design competence person, and you are currently teaching as a professor at the Machakos, I'm probably mispronouncing it, university, but you do this right, in Kenya. But you have taught at different places. You're widely traveled. You have taught in Botswana, in Canada, in India, in Norway, in Sweden and Uganda. I'm not sure if you ever came to Germany, because that is where I'm based. My name is Uli Weinberg, director of the School of Design Thinking in Potsdam, and we didn't have the chance to invite you physically to come to our place, especially through the past 2 years with the pandemic, but I'm pretty sure there will be the chance, maybe even to our 15th anniversary, which we are celebrating in September this year. So, we had several chats, and I liked very much your very open-minded design thinking, design approach, which is reaching out to design thinking. And from your perspective as an industrial designer, researcher and consultant, it is very interesting now to learn how you see the whole world of human-centered design and the development of design in Africa. And since you are one of the most prominent voices of the design and design thinking community in Africa, please welcome Mugendi. And I try to pronounce your last name. Let's give it another try. Mudvaritha. So Mugendi, but you all call you Mugendi. So please, warm welcome to you, and the stage is yours. Thanks for joining us here.
Thank you, Uli, for that really warm invitation to share with everyone else. I have been to Germany, but unfortunately not for design thinking. So maybe we can change that in the future. Because I've been with the World Design Organization, most of what I did, even in terms of coming to Germany, was to advance industrial design as a profession. But evidently, with this conversation and many others we hope to have, I intend to get much more involved, and hopefully I might visit Potsdam at some point. So thank you, friends, for this very warm invitation and welcome. I'll just start with emphasizing that one of the key elements of community life in Africa, which coincidentally is one of the principles that we try to inculcate in practicing designers who are keen on design thinking, is the concept of empathy. I think the person who best captures this is Leopold Senghor, who was the first president of Senegal. And he put it in a beautiful way, and I just quote him here, that I feel the other, I dance the other, therefore I am. I think it plays a bit on the Cartesian logic because of, the referencing of who I am, in terms of who I believe I am. But the feeling and the dancing suggests some interplay and some kind of empathy. And that's why I like it. Okay, not to mention the fact that in Africa, music, dance is quite well known. Now, the other thing that we extend within the concept of empathy is just how interconnected we are in the world. Often there's this strange polemics where you talk about the developed and underdeveloped or developing countries. You talk about the East or the West, the North or the South. But ultimately, if you look at the world as 100 people, you start to see that maybe there are many more conversations we can actually have when you realize that in terms of literacy, there's challenges. For example, we have some 17% of humanity who are not able to read and write. And then you have some interesting statistics from a state like Kerala, which is in southern India, where they have a literacy rate of 99%, which is very impressive, higher than any other country in the world. And then in terms of internet access and mobile telephony, there's some very exciting things happening, and this offers opportunities as designers to tap into the internet of things and the possibilities that social media and other platforms are enabling us to connect across vast distances like we're doing tonight or this afternoon from where you are. And of course, the challenges of housing, water, etc. So this schematic or infographic reminds us that we are all basically part of one continuous humanity. Again, I often like to talk about Africa, not from the Mercator projection that you see in front of you, because if you look at Africa here, it looks slightly larger than, say, South America, or even the US for that matter, it looks almost bigger. And this is a convenient metric projection, but I think it actually does injustice to a continent that has 55 countries with every conceivable climatic kind of zone, except obviously the Arctics, although Cape Town comes pretty close to the southern Antarctica region. But most of Africa is tropical and temperate, although we have deserts at the extreme ends, the Sahara, which is famous, and also the Kalahari down south. And what is strange is the way people speak of Africa as south of the Sahara, which is basically cutting across this land where there's Sudan and Chad, and Mauritania, Mali, and so on. But Africa is one land, as I argue, even though these boundaries might appear, they are really artificial constructs. They do not divide the people as one might think. And just expounding on the concept of the size of the continent, this image, this again, infographic kind of demonstrates that, I think, very effectively. Because if you look at the size of the USA now that it's in this, flattened projection, you realize that Africa is very large, because the US would fit into Western Africa, China into Southeast Africa, India into East Africa, and most of Europe, including Germany, Spain, and even the UK here fits into the other bits, and Japan would form that little corner there. So I wish to present to you, friends, the Africa that we know, an Africa that is really big. And then the challenges are there. So you'll see that most of Africa is populated around the coasts, and there's massive populations and challenges around housing in some of these places. Here you will see on the left side the projected populations by the year 2025, which is about 3 years from now. And in that period, Lagos in Nigeria will reach almost 16 million people in one city. And Cairo, which is presently the largest city in terms of population, will be about 13.5. So the place is growing rapidly. That's the first point I wanted to make. But there's a lot of unplanned structures and settlements. And this is, I'm alluding to the project I'll present very quickly as a case study as we move on. And then on the right is a typical or traditional view of Africa as a place of raw materials and resources. The darker the color, the less renewable that resource is. And I know as we speak about oil and gas, this is a very sensitive topic in Europe and Russia right now. But we can see that energy security could be one way to get Africa moving in the right direction. And then in terms of population, it's forecasted that by the year 2050, will be about 9.6 billion people. And what will happen if you look at what happened in the earlier parts of the century, where a country like, say, Nigeria, which was not on the map at this point, quickly, that would be about 1950. In 2011, Nigeria was midway between the top 20 most populated nations. And you'll notice very quickly that Nigeria, by the year 2050, when there's about 9.6 billion people, Nigeria will be the third most populated country in the world. As we speak today, Nigeria is about 200 million people, which means that 1 in every 6 Africans is a Nigerian. There's about 1.2 billion people in our continent, which is still slightly lower than India for a country a continent the size that I showed earlier. This I'll just skip through, but it's just to give you an idea of the size of the different economies, and to show you the growth in real terms expected from the year 2018 when this survey was done through to 2030 and finally to 2050. Where I am is in Kenya, East Africa, and Kenya and Ethiopia are almost the same size in terms of the GDP. So it's a robust region, whereas in West Africa, Nigeria kind of dominates. And we need to remember also that Nigeria has the largest economy in Africa. Then we have South Africa, which dominates Southern Africa, and so on. So ease of entrepreneurship. Rwanda, which many of you may have heard of, actually has gone through some fundamental changes that have improved the way in which business can be done. You only need 3 days to open business in Rwanda, whereas the global average is 34 days. So you can imagine in places like Angola, it still takes almost twice the average, which is 68 days. There's work to be done. And then energy consumption, this is a big shift now towards consuming renewable energies. So as you notice, I'm using proverbs because this is one of the tools that Africans use quite a bit in speech and in public discourse. And in this case, I reference a Kenyan proverb that suggests that change is inevitable. So if the rhythm of the drum beat changes, then the dance steps must adapt accordingly. That's a fact. I'm giving you an example of what I call a hybrid solution, not one that is to be taken too literally, but this was some time back, actually about 20 years back in rural Botswana. And what I found fascinating about this particular solution was how there was a use of the vehicle body, which still worked, and the replacement of the engines with these donkeys, which are more sustainable solution in that part of the world. So the concept of hybridity is something that we find quite very common in African solutions. We know what the pure solution should be, but we also try to work with the constraints and the resources available. Ezio Manzini, who many of you may know, who's a foremost design commentator and author, speaks about the leapfrog hypothesis that I subscribe to. that it's possible to move from the traditional societies that many of us in Africa have to where Europe and many other parts of the world are, which is at the third step, which is an advanced multi-local society. The only challenge is that in going from number 1 to 3, many societies go through number 2, which delocalizes the society. So there's fragmentation because of loss of that social fabric. But the argument is that it's possible to leapfrog using the tools that we have at our disposal, particularly social media and the tools of connectivity that we have at present. I'm giving you a few examples of what's going on the continent. This is an electric vehicle that was developed in Uganda. This is a passenger vehicle, and there's also a bus that is actually running around Kampala. This is a product that won the Best of the Best Red Dot Award, which is a prestigious German industrial design award. And it's basically designed in Cape Town by a company known as Deso. And it uses the back wheel of a bicycle to charge this power bank, which can be used to power and store energy for domestic applications. You may have heard of M-Pesa, which means mobile pesa. Pesa in Swahili means money. This is a Kenyan solution, which leapfrogs and avoids altogether the need for formal banking by just sending money through a mobile phone, a very basic phone. And this is taken over so much of the business that is happening as we speak today. And then also urban gardening, but also in informal settings. So like this gentleman here, Stephen Lamb is from South Africa, working with shanty and slum communities to develop solutions for gardening, vertical gardening in those kind of resource-constrained environments. This is a prototype of that structure, which uses drip or gravity feed. And then in Kenya, there's been a solution that has been developed for running shoes. Enda in Swahili means to move or to be mobile. And world marathon runners came together and pooled their resources and their experience and expertise to come up with these shoes. And now they're actually in production as we speak. As you know, Kenya is the home of the marathon champions, and it was fitting that those champions would use their tacit and embedded knowledge to help develop a product that is truly user-friendly. Then a couple of young people from Ghana and Kenya, in fact, 2 young people, one young man from Ghana and one from Kenya, have come up with something called Leti Arts, which is basically creating games that reference the heroes of the continent. Many of you may have heard of Shaka Zulu from South Africa, but there are many who need to be referenced. And then in Ghana again, there's a African Robotics Network, which is working on developing low-cost robotic solutions, tapping into the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence, machine learning, and hopefully to launch Africa into the 4th industrial revolution. This is a solution that was developed for a young lady known as Nikki Abdinor in Cape Town, who was born without hands, and the idea was to develop a vehicle for her, which she could drive using a drive-by-wire system. This was in my former institution in Cape Town, and we developed this solution for her. And then one of our former students also developed a solution for Nuru, which means light in Swahili. And the business model was, I think, more interesting because apart from these different ways in which you can couple the lighting modules, which use LEDs, which are rechargeable, there was also the idea of charging them. And those who use these units to charge actually make money. And the business model is you give a discharged lamp, you pay a small fee and about 20 US cents. And the person pedals for about 30 minutes with 5 of these gadgets on, and you're able to go back and use your device. They also came up with solutions which would use, play, or even just the normal electricity where you have it, or even solar. So the idea, again, I was speaking of hybridity. And then this is in Rwanda, which I referenced earlier. Rwanda is actually arguably one of the fastest growing economies in the world, #1. But also very progressive. They just launched the first dedicated Institute for Artificial Intelligence Research. So Rwanda is moving very far ahead. And this example I'm showing you here is the world's first drone port, where they use drones, which you can see here in the foreground, to transport essential medicines and blood for transfusion. From this point in Kigali, which is the capital city, it takes about 17 minutes to any part of the country to deliver these essential goods. But then, even as we get excited about leapfrogging, we need to remind ourselves of the need to be appropriate to the task. Every solution, as we know, as design thinking practitioners and as designers and as strategists, is about fit for purpose. So the Sierra Leonean proverb here puts it very nicely, that a razor may be sharper than an axe, but it cannot cut wood. Very true. So we need to look for solutions that are fitting. And in this case, I reference the UN SDGs and how designers can contribute to that, even in Africa. And that design thinking helps us to unlock the kind of tacit and embedded knowledge that resides in communities. Because without the buy-in of the communities, these goals will not be met. And now we have about 8 years left before we realize them. Then we also know that there's about 5 major megatrends, like demographic shifts where aging populations is becoming the norm, with places like Japan leading with the number of centenarians in the world. There's also, unfortunately, the case of refugees and migrations fleeing from Africa and leaving mainly for Europe. And sadly, this is exacerbated by climate change, because as you know, most of African communities rely on agriculture. And because of climate change, the extreme weather patterns have meant that agriculture has been unpredictable at best and failing at worst. But that's not only an African challenge, as you can see from here. Latin Americans are trying to get into the US, despite Trump's wall in Texas and California. Then we have in Southeast Asia, people trying to move into Europe, as well as to Australia, which has been successful in stopping those migrations. So the challenge is we need to start coming up with robust solutions to keep people in their home countries, because letting them into other countries is a very short-term solution, which is not sustainable. We need to think about how we can create opportunities in Africa. And this is one of my commitments, as my life commitments, actually, as a design practitioner in Africa. We need to create solutions that the youth can find gainful employment in and sustainable livelihoods. Then the second of this is mega trends is the change in global economic power. We know that BRICS, which was Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, was initially considered the fastest growing grouping. Now we have MINT, and we have so many others, but MINT is Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. And there are other groupings depending on how you want to look at them, and the groupings always change. But what's happening is that the old ways in which economic power rested are shifting constantly. And I think that means even for designers, we need to be open-minded and flexible. So not to use our razor blade in every instance, because that's not the only tool we have, but also to use our axe in that instance. So that's the infographic for those countries that are acronamed as MINT. Then urbanization is accelerating. And in Africa, we have a challenge, as I alluded earlier, where we have a rising middle class, but a lot of poverty right next. And most of the design thinking challenges we're engaged in are to find solutions for the urban poor. And the case study I'll be showing references this particular challenge. This is, I think, in South America, where the favelas are either in Rio de Janeiro or thereabouts. And on the right, you can see this privileged group with swimming pools on every balcony and overlooking unplanned settlements across. Then number 4, I've alluded to this again, but I wanted just to reference Cape Town, where I've lived for the last couple of years, my second home, and that climate change is really ravaging the world as we know. I've talked about the link between climate change and the migration and refugee challenge, but it's also affecting the way in which cities work. This was Cape Town a couple of years back when there was frost, which we happily call snow, which I know most of our friends in Europe would say that is not snow, because that is indeed true, but it really caused disruption. This was the first time in living memory where people saw this kind of weather. You can imagine the freak accidents for society that isn't familiar with that kind of pattern. And then the very next summer, that was the winter, the next summer we had raging fires because the heat was record heat. So you had record cold in one season, and the very next summer you have record hot temperatures, which caused raging fires for up to 4 days, which were uncontrollable in Cape Town. And then very soon after, Cape Town became the first city in the world to declare that it had run out of water. And this was the largest dam in Cape Town, which had actually essentially run out of water. You can see from the watermarks up here where that water ought to have been, just below these windows. So that is indeed a challenge. And then happily, one of the first ones that brings a bit of hope is the technological breakthroughs that we see through the Internet of Things, big data, and other applications which are leading to smart cities, driverless vehicles, and other solutions. So Africa is actually riding on the crest of this, whereas countries like Germany and the US and China lead in terms of fourth industrial revolution solutions. We know for a fact that in Africa, there's a number of science parks that are coming up. In fact, very near my university, about 16 kilometers away, there's what we christened as the Silicon Savannah, which is a massive science park, which is known as Konza Technopolis. As you can see, SAP is one of the leaders in this space, and others who are also moving us in that interconnected world. And so transhumanism and the connection between machine and human is becoming the new realm of ethical debate. Where does a machine stop and where does the human begin? We've seen that particularly in sports, where people with enhanced powers are able sometimes to do things that people without disabilities actually cannot manage. So we have bionic human beings, and what is the future of that? And what are the ethical conundrums that we have to address as we move in that future? So design thinking is known to all. I'm going to skip it, but it's about business viability, technical feasibility, and social desirability. And we know that the principles exist. We use the Hasso-Plattner model, which is, we find the 6-step one very good because it takes us all the way back into testing. I talked about the slum problem. Here you can see just how serious it is. In countries like Sierra Leone, where I referenced the razor blade and the axe, almost 95% of all the people who live in the cities there actually live in slums, which is quite sad. In South Africa, it's about 1/3 of those people. In Kenya, it's closer to 2/3, and so on and so forth. So we do have indeed a unique challenge on the continent. And you can see why sub-Saharan Africa is referenced, because in Egypt, Morocco, and a few others, there are consistently smaller populations living in the slum areas. But still, it's in Africa, and we need to recognize that. So I'm going to get into a very quick project of showing you how we addressed this problem using design thinking. Slum development in Cape Town, in a place known as Bloemberg, and with about 15,000 residents. In 1994, they just raided this farm. It was a dairy farm. And there was no planning, and they just took over. Eventually, the city just gave them the title so they could have some services. So our team looked at solid waste management through the design thinking lens. We interviewed the community members. We did an appreciative inquiry investigation, and we went through any typical design thinking and human-centered design project. One of the first things we discovered is the people call themselves Sibabalwe, which is a Xhosa word which means we are blessed. And so the aspirational component, even though there's poverty, people still have hope of a better tomorrow. And we tapped into that because design ultimately is about critical optimism. We need to believe that we are part of the solution, and we can co-create and co-design to co-produce solutions that are indeed humane. And so these are some of the solutions. I'm not showing the final bit. I can always share the videos with anyone who's interested. But we found some of the residents with very interesting, clean, beautiful yards, and we use them as our champions to help us advance this kind of thinking. We used participatory design and co-design as in a complementary fashion, and we worked with the city of Cape Town to roll out the solution. So I'm not going to get into the solution today, but anyone who's interested can always reach me through Uli and Stephanie. So I want to conclude by suggesting, as Ben Okri, who's a Nigerian poet, puts it, there are three Africas: the one we see every day, which is essentially what you see if you don't look too critically. Then there's the one they write about. These are the people who have not engaged with the Africa that we see emerging. And then there's the real magical Africa, and I put Africa with a K, which Uli and our friends know is an attempt by people on this continent to co-create a new narrative about the continent from their own perspective. And the real magical Africa we don't see unfolding through all the difficulties of our time, like a quiet miracle. I believe in that, and I would like to say that is where I'd like to end for now, so that we can have a conversation. So thank you very much, Uli, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Mugendi. And I would like to all of you to switch on your cameras if you can. That would be nice. And also that we could see your applause. We see the digital applause, but yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your broad insight, actually also for your kind of framing Africa for all of us in a way. There are people from Europe mostly, as I see, but also from Asia. But we all don't have that, especially myself. You know, I just talk for myself. We have not the right picture about the size of that country and all the potential. And I think you framed that very, very well. And so I have written down here several questions, but I would like to start with the question, since you were the president of the World Design Organization, actually the first from Africa ever, and you were working you're still kind of the emeritus president and the senator, but in 2015 to 2017, you were kind of the president of the World Design Organization. At that time, was that already a time where design thinking was playing a role for you, or was it more your original industrial design background which brought you there? Well, how was that? This is five years ago or so.
Yeah, thank you, Uli. That was a really good question. And thank you, friends. You've been very generous with your feedback and response. Interestingly, because my background, as you know, is in industrial design, and my association with the D-School is actually what started my passion for design thinking and human-centered design. Now, so what happened is, when I was the president-elect from 2013 to 2015, we initiated a redesign of the World Design Organization. Some of you may know that it was previously known as the International Council for the Societies of Industrial Design, which is quite a mouthful, acronym ICSID. But when we spoke to our members, some of our members could not even say the full meaning of that name. So we used actually deliberately, and this was in Sydney, Australia, we entered into a design thinking process where we actually looked at our project from the user perspective. And so we interviewed members, we went across the world to see how design was understood, especially industrial design, but design in general was understood by different communities. And if we even redefined industrial design to incorporate the co-creative element, Previously, the industrial designer was a little bit chauvinistic, if I might say so, in that they believed that they were the ones with the answers. I can tell you for a fact through practice that we are part of the solution, and at best we are facilitators of a co-design process. And so if you look at the definition of industrial design, we actually for the first time used languaging that practitioners of design thinking will recognize immediately, because we talked about products, products, services, systems, and user experiences. So for the first time, we moved away from just products to include processes and systems, and ultimately user experiences, which is very important for anyone. So that was the journey, and I was championing that. I also introduced the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a way for industrial designers to contribute to the global agenda.
Thank you. Thank you for clearing that up, because with the design thinking community, which is somehow represented here in a small portion, but compared to the whole movement of design, which is has a long history, is very, very tiny. I'm always interested to learn how these kind of other organizations, since like 5 years ago, we started the Global Design Thinking Alliance, as you know, Mugendi, and as a little thing, and it's growing, and it's still on the way. And for me is the question also how to collaborate and cooperate with these kind of traditional design institutions, and is there for a design thinker like myself, for me, design is one of the lots of disciplines we need in the design thinking process to solve the problems we are facing. And if you're looking at the SDG problems, and this is just the 17 sustainable development goals, for me, it's even it's not enough. It's not the number is way higher, but I'm happy that they reduced it to kind of 17 to get an idea. Yes, we can do something. So how would you see that? If you look at your experiences also being a part of the advisory committee for the Decon Festival, which will happen in October this year in South Africa. And I see also Ulrich is also a part of the advisory committee here.
Yes.
So how would you see that? What kind of role could design and design thinking play in the future, looking at the big challenges we are facing, and you were naming those, like climate change?
That's excellent. I'm happy to see friends who I also have met. The last mile is a human mile. I think part of the challenge with policy making and planning is we tend to fall back on our professional training as soon as we are presented with a challenge or any kind of designerly problem that we need to address. Design thinking, in my view, is uniquely placed to make the greatest contribution in the 21st century, because despite the advances in technology, most of the failings we come across are human in nature. Secondly, if we expect to get buy-in and ownership from societies and communities as we move towards a future that we all want, then design thinking again is a kind of the natural complement. And to put it from an African perspective, many of you have heard of Ubuntu, and Ubuntu posits, I am because we are. I've also tweaked that a little bit and made it an action verb and said, I participate and therefore I am. So it means that if we want people to get involved in anything that we are doing, whether we are looking at governance or looking at education or looking at sustainable development as a domain, we must win people along. And design thinking has the essential tools within its toolkit to actually unlock the kind of creativity and innovation that resides in our communities. And we need to start to recognize that.
Mugendi, here's Jürgen. I really like your innovations which you had on your presentation and all the wonderful ideas. I'm running lectures myself, and I want to invite you to give a guest speak there, just that you know it, because I'm really fascinated about all the ideas condensed in your slides. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Jürgen, and I'll be happy to collaborate.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jürgen. And we have Nalin from India. Thanks for joining us. It's so late at your place, I know, but thanks for being with us, Nalin.
It's always delightful to be part of the design thinking community, and I was able to hear the later part of the session. I was held up in another meeting. Wonderful presentation. I really enjoy the later part. I like to hear your views. Design thinking generally takes longer period to implement and also to see the results. How is the members or the society or fraternity in Africa is actually receiving it and bringing into practice?
Yeah, thank you, Nalin. And if you might know, I actually spent 2 years in India, so I'm an honorary Indian. Yeah, but back to business. I think the time it takes to develop an understanding, this first stage that we usually call the understand phase, where we're trying to develop empathy, that takes time. There is no shortcut to getting to connect as human beings. You need to talk to people, you need to walk in their shoes. In fact, one of my friends says you need to speak to their listening. Once you speak to people's listenings, once you understand their hopes and aspirations, then you start to now connect. So it takes longer to build trust, because trust is a very fragile attribute. It's not something that you can take for granted. But once you build that trust, moving forward is much quicker, because now everyone is on board. So I think that's why it's usually a bit expensive in terms of time, not necessarily any other resources. And then also because we participate as a means, or we participate as an end. So depending on our agenda, if you're participating as a means to an end, then you kind of try to rush people along. But if you're participating as an end in itself, because you enjoy communicating with people, seeing people liberated and emancipated and transforming their societies, then that little cost of investment is justified in the long run. To put it in a different analogy, when building a house, we spend the most amount of time in the foundation. And people hear noises and see dust rising, and months on end, they don't see anything rising from the ground. But once that foundation is sorted, we can go 60, 70 stories very rapidly. And I think design thinking as a process actually follows something quite similar in my experience.
Exactly. And when you repeat it, then you optimize level by level wherever you go.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
The iteration, is that what you meant?
Yes, the iterative process. Yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciate both of your feedbacks, and thank you, Professor. And you're most welcome to come to India. I'll be happy to host you. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Nalin is heading a very nice, great school and large school, actually, with lots of students. And the good thing, what he is a part of the Global Design Thinking Alliance, because he's driving the whole school, which is not a design school. It's just a school and academics structure for students. He's driving the whole thing in a design thinking mindset, and that was for us for sure the entry point to become a member of the Global Design Thinking Alliance. And now we have André Breskes. André Breskes is a professor in Cologne, and he is actually helping teachers to become more design thinking minded. He's educating future teachers, and he has a question.
Yes, that exactly would be my question. If we could participate in, on the one hand, educating and training these teachers in design thinking, and on the other hand, help Africa with achieving this global sustainability goals. That is my basic idea, and I was wandering around for a time to meet people who could help here and cooperate with. And if I just listening to your pictures and your worldview, I have the impression that I just found such a soulmate here. You must imagine.
Yeah, thank you, Andre. Yes, yeah. I'm looking forward to connecting with you as well. Yes, thank you.
Great. Just a short impression. So we have 14,000 teachers in Cologne, students who get trained here. We have no product design. So when we first brought design thinking to Cologne, everyone was like, okay, we don't have devices to design here. But as you know as well, that's not the basic idea. When you say, okay, let's find solutions so that the people in the townships have clean drinking water or get rid of their garbage, how can they organize this? That would be just about these topics. And we could do joint seminars. We are enjoying the same time zone. That could be easy.
Yes.
And you could have a waste amount of German students bringing their incredible brains into a solution finding.
Yes.
And that would be a nice perspective. That would be so great. And that would be much benefit for a teacher educating students to get a global perspective on what's going on here.
Exactly.
I agree, Andre. In fact, part of the challenge for us when speaking to non-designers is we have to stop using jargon. We also have to use a language that is inclusive. I often talk about breaking the ice instead of speaking about design. And if you break the ice, ICE, in my view, is innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. So if I speak about the breaking the ice, then suddenly the room lights up. And some people say, I want to talk about innovation or creativity or entrepreneurship. Then we can say, now this design thinking will actually aid in this process. So I think it's also for us to speak to the listening of our audience and not just to speak to each other, because we all understand what we're saying. Indeed.
Okay, very much thanks. And perhaps we can talk this through when we are meeting Cape Town.
Indeed, I'll visit you in Cologne, virtually or otherwise.
Or visit you in Cape Town, right?
Yes,
next year is Rolf Mehnert, and he is representing a design company which I know very well, Fünf Werken.
Hello, Uli.
Hello, Rolf.
Sorry that I have no video on. I'm on the highway next to Bilbao on my way to Bordeaux. So, but it was very important for me to join this meeting, and so I want to say thank you for this good presentation. And we are already connected by LinkedIn, Mugendi, and I want to hear you in real life. So I want to say thank you very much.
Yes.
And on the other hand, I'm the speaker of the German Design Club. So all are very all tradition with Dieter Rams. He's getting 90 next week. He's part of the club. And you mentioned something, or Uli mentioned the point that the designer, it's an old tradition. And when you talk to traditional designer about the design thinking, they are always not so amused about it. Not everybody, but a lot of them. And I think it's one part is very important to connect these design thinkers and designers. And at the end, in my company and by Fünf Werken, it was a big challenge to bring them in the change process to think, I'm already do design thinking. I'm a designer. That's part of my life. Now we have a word for this part of method thinking, and it's really a challenge to integrate even the traditional designer in this kind of thinking. But we need them, and as well like the others. And that just want to. I was very. I like to hear you're a traditional designer, you were connected to that design thinking, and you say, well, let's use it. So thank you. And I hope we will meet in real sometimes.
Indeed, Rolf, thank you very much, and wish you a safe trip. And while
Thank
we're
you.
at it, I think part of the cynicism that comes from our fellow designers is because they say we don't need to discuss design, we just do it. Whereas the non-designers, immediately you unpack it, they say, I see this. In fact, design thinking is more popular among non-designers. In fact, in business schools, every MBA cannot get enough of design thinking, whereas the designers who should be naturally the ambassadors seem to have this cynical view. Dieter Rams is one of our heroes and a long-standing member of the World Design Organization. I mean, his case studies with Brown and also his continued prolific work as a designer has inspired many of us. We often pray that we can continue being as creative as he is way into our senior years. So that's a person we hold in very high esteem at the World Design Organization.
Yeah, and his 10 rules of design and even solutions for the problems of the world. So, in my opinion, okay, thank you.
They're timeless. They're timeless. Good design is honest. Good design, that is timeless. It reminds us of why we. In fact, it's very humbling because today we have the so-called Godzigners, who I don't like that concept very much. Because these Godzigners think they are, elevated on a pedestal. But what we need are designers who serve humanity with their talent and creativity. So that's something that we've learned from Dieter Rams, and hopefully more designers can emulate his example.
Yeah. And the last sentence, and I hope I can connect you to the German Design Club, and we will have the chance to interact. Okay. Thank you. That's from my side.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rolf. And our next here on the list is Lucky Lakshman, whom I know through his long year work at SAP, design thinking work at SAP, and also at the School of Design Thinking sometime for several semesters. So Lucky, from India, you are in Bangalore probably.
Yes, thanks, Ruli. Thank you so much. Hello, Mugendi. It was a wonderful and insightful presentation, and a lot of myths around Africa. You were able to resolve them. Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a very simple question to you. Is about if your organization is involved with your government to shape up any public policy. If so, can you tell us a bit? What has been the changes?
Yeah, thank you, Lucky, for that. I mean, one of the biggest challenges in any design process is winning over government officials, because I think, unfortunately for us, politicians and government officials are very risk averse, and design, innovation, creativity, entrepreneurship is on the opposite spectrum. It's about taking calculated risks because you can see the potential reward. So the way in which personally I've gone about this is to infiltrate as many of the think tanks as I can, and then to demonstrate using examples like the one I showed of Cape Town, how the governments can actually benefit from using design thinking. So the first question they ask is cost. So if you can reassure them that it's not going to blow their budget, and that if it fails, you're not going to blame them, then they're more willing to listen to you. Secondly, you can demonstrate to them that by using design thinking, they will have social equity and cohesion among their communities. They could stand actually to win electoral votes because people are happier with their performance. And many other ways in which we have to speak to their listening so that they can understand. But it's a big challenge. But once you win, and then the other thing we've done is to identify champions. And once one of them gets it, he becomes a self-motivated ambassador within those environments, and they keep inviting us to demonstrate the efficacy of design thinking as often as possible. So it takes time, but once you win their trust and you can demonstrate to them value, then they're much more willing to take on design thinking. I found in South Africa, it was once the mayor of the city got it, her team got it. So sometimes you have almost to aim for the top, because once you influence the top person, then they can influence everyone else beneath and around them, than to start at the bottom as a grassroots kind of idea, because it takes far too long to reach the decision makers.
Yeah,
Interesting, very interesting.
I fully agree. Actually, in Mugendi, we had the same experience in Potsdam, in the city where the D-School is located, close to Berlin. The mayor was visiting us, and he got infected with the design thinking virus somehow. And all of a sudden, there were so many things possible. We did so many projects. We were still involved in doing things, and actually, it helped the city quite a bit. So he's a big fan. He became a big fan of design thinking. Last in the line here is Raquel Carillo from Mozambique. So please, it's your time, because our time is running out right now. I see here the 60 minutes is passing. Just a fast forward question to Mugendi. How long are you still available? So we'll officially have that last question from Raquel, but will you have some other minutes, like 10 minutes or so?
I'll give you 10 more minutes.
Good.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, Raquel.
Thank you so much. Basically is to thank you, Mugendi, for this presentation, and also present myself, because I'm a Mozambican designer. I used to be working as a consultant and a researcher in design thinking, and also with human-centered design. So it was nice to see this presentation, and also basically I feel you when you shared some of the cases. I feel recognized, like some of those and some of the challenges are probably the same here in the continent. So, well, I would like to continue to talk with you and connect with you, and probably to see how we can challenge some of the, or can we proceed or share more cases and challenges that probably will be the same. And also to continue learning from you. So yeah, basically what was that.
Well, muito obrigado, Raquel. I'm very happy to connect with you. And I look forward to hearing much more about what you're doing as well. Are you in Maputo?
Yes, I'm based in Maputo, okay. But I'm working more in the district in projects related to social innovation. But yes, basically okay. I'm based in Maputo.
Excellent. We'll stay in touch, definitely.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. Actually, I would now officially end also the spotlight session here with Mugendi, and we'll soon stop also the recording. But before that, I would like to give you all a little glance in what will be coming. We have in September, we are celebrating the 15th anniversary of the School of Design Thinking, and that will be September 15 and 16. It's a 2-day mini conference, and we'll celebrate the impact of design thinking through the past 15 years. We're inviting former students and project partners, coaches, and the team and the friends and family to be there. And then 4 weeks later, we have our Decon Festival. And the first time in the history of the Decon Festival, it's the 3rd Decon Festival through the past years. We'll do this not in Germany, it will be in South Africa, in Cape Town. And please save the date, October 12 to 14, 2022. And we have 2 of the advisory board members here. And I think I'm pretty sure I have a glance already. I'm also part of the planning committee. So there will be highly interesting setup and highly interesting speakers. And both of the events, for those who don't have the chance to travel so far, both of the events will be held also in a hybrid mode. We want to make sure that everyone who wants to participate gets the chance to get at least
Oh, he's gonna win.
And we usually do every month, we do a spotlight session. And the next one, Steffi was going to present also, but just today we learned that the person who was invited does not have the time at that moment, so we can't announce the next one, but there will be one in June. There will be a session, and you get to know that through email on the website, the gdta.org website. We will always announce that. So thanks a lot, Mugendi. Again, big applause for being with us here. And